People tell you you're no longer allowed to do it again. You're no longer allowed to be an actor because we believe you're this character, and that's the only character we're ever going to let you play again. That changed everything for me. The most interesting man in the world.
I'm just going to go ahead and create something over here.
Coming up on Another Act, I have a candid chat with Alfonso Ribeiro about Hollywood representation, the not-so-light side of what Carlton Banks did for his career, and his very successful transition into the world of game show host. You know, I read recently that you consider yourself to be a throwback entertainer. What did you mean by that?
Back in the day, as I like to call it, you couldn't just do one thing to be successful. You had to sing, you had to dance, you had to act, you had to write, you had to produce, you had to be able to do it all. And in this generation, you know, it's really like you're an actor or you're a singer or you're a dancer, or right? And when you try to venture into another area, the industry itself is like, no, we see you this way and this way alone. And so I view myself as that throwback because I started on Broadway, where you had to sing, act, and dance, right? And then ended up on TV, and now it's like I'm doing all of that, and now I learned how to host. I learned how to be a game show host. I never stopped learning how to do something different in this industry, which is what you used to have to be able to do to be successful. So that's why I kind of view myself as like a throwback to that time when you had to learn it all.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to date you a little bit, but I'm also effectively dating myself because, I mean, I've been a fan since the Pepsi commercial, and that really got cemented with Silver Spoon. And I think one of the reasons why is because that was the first time that I remember seeing a young Black boy on television. Even as a kid, that representation felt significant and important. At what point were you able to understand and process what a moment that was?
I think it was when you just said it. No, I'm playing. I would probably say, you know, maybe into my 20s, I was really able to look at that. You know, when I always felt like when you're in it and you're just doing it, right? You're not really looking at the impact that you're having. But what I did notice was maybe when I got into my 20s, all of the kids that were watching me, I started to meet all those kids as adults, and they would all come and say, you know, I was jealous of you during the Pepsi commercial, or I really looked up to you on Silver Spoons, and then even into Fresh Prince. And it was the idea that I looked around and there weren't really many of me, right? There was me and Malcolm Jamal Warner, right? Those are really the only two Black kids in the 80s. Malcolm and I were, you know, products of the New York system of theater, and then going into being on TV and then living, you know, a good life off screen also, right? Being good people off screen. And so that's when it kind of hit me. It was like, oh wow, I was kind of a leader of a young group of young Black actors and singers and dancers that felt like, hey, we can do this because he's done it and it's possible. And to be honest with you, looking back at it now, it's like, what an amazing honor, right? To be able to be that. And I think that, you know, I would say, unfortunately, sometimes the community forgets things like that. And so when you say that to me, it's incredibly appreciated because, you know, I don't unfortunately get the recognition from my people necessarily in the industry of kind of what I did in a time when there were very few that did it.
That's surprising because that felt, again, even as a kid, so groundbreaking at the time. Why do you think that is, that you're not getting that acknowledgement and appreciation that you really should be getting?
Maybe not, you know, being a person who has said, you know, I'm going to lead the brigade of Blackness, may be a reason why I'm not. And then once you play a role like Carlton, where ultimately you're, you know, really white, you don't represent the perspective, the direction you want it to be looked at. And so it is what it is. But I'm always appreciative of being acknowledged by the community whenever it does happen.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, and thank you for sharing all of that. Very insightful. Do you think, all of that said, that role of Carlton Banks was limiting in the aspect that people might have thought that it reflected who you were as a real person, and what was that like for you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that was a time in which the industry was crossing over from being, everything scripted to reality. And so there was a change in the way people looked at performers. It was like, oh, you had to be who you were. And the way people saw me was simply as that role, as Carlton. And I've said this on interviews before, but I said that role was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me and the bane of my existence. Because imagine for a second, you do something so well that people tell you you're no longer allowed to do it again. You're no longer allowed to be an actor because we believe you're this character, and that's the only character we're ever going to let you play again. There is also a pain and a suffering, an anger, a resentment. There was a lot of things that I went through over the many years to deal with the fact that, wow, I played this guy so well, they won't let me do anything again. But right during that time, if you were a TV star, you couldn't do movies, right? Will Smith was one of the few people to break that mold. And now it's like, if you're a TV star, you're a movie star. You're just a star, and you could do it all if simply, you're good enough to do it. So it was a very difficult thing for me. But looking back, I kind of go, wow, look what I was able to do. I've been in this business for 41 years working.
Yeah.
I'm so lucky that I get to continue doing it. I just had to reinvent myself, decades later, to actually being me, right? I can't act anymore. They won't let me act anymore. So I said, well, I don't need to play a role. I'll just play me. And people found that to be enjoyable. So I'm lucky enough to keep doing it.
Oh man, so many gems, I guess is probably the better way to say that, were dropped just now. At what point did you feel like you processed and worked through and got on the other side of kind of all of that pain that you just described?
It's very interesting. The weirdest place you would ever process it and figure it out. My buddy Joey Fatone from NSYNC invited me on a bus trip. Right, bunch of guys, 13 guys, and we went on a Major League Baseball ballpark tour where we just went to baseball games with a bunch of guys. But essentially, going out on this guys trip, I gained a wonderful perspective of like, wow, I should actually honor this space that I was in, and seeing myself from their eyes, just being a guy, just hanging out and not being in Hollywood and just separating myself really gave me a perspective of actually loving my Carlton character, not hating him. That changed everything for me. It gave me a perspective of like, I can actually love my past while hating my past and honoring my present and where I'm going in the future. It just changed the way I saw the world, the way I saw myself in this world and in this business. It was a wonderful experience that changed everything for me.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that, because you have really found success and great success as a game show host. I was going to ask, why do you think that you're able to connect with both, an in-person audience, but certainly an audience at home in this space the way that you are?
I learned that at the end of the day, you're playing to that little box with a lens on it, and then the audience that happen to be in the room is filler, right? So when I became a director, I started looking at things not from the side that I'm on, but on the other side of the lens, and recognizing tonnage and energy, vibe, product in terms of what you're selling. Once you start to understand it from the other side, then you're able to actually perform, recognizing what needs to be seen on that other side. So game show is all about an actual game. You're playing a game. How does the audience receive the game is my job as the host. So I'm the director on the floor. I'm moving the game. I'm managing the game. I'm keeping the pace of the game where it needs to be. I'm doing all the little things that a director would normally do in editing. I'm doing it on the floor as I'm hosting. So I'm playing to that little box with a lens, but I'm recognizing what needs to be understood, what information they need at different points in the game to understand what's actually happening. There's a lot going on, but you can't do it until you understand the game itself and then understand the product that you want it to look like and how you want it to be delivered to that audience.
You know, I think that you first directed television when you were on Fresh Prince, right?
Yes, I did. My first episode was Fresh Prince.
At what point in your career did you start to think about other things that you could do aside from being in front of the camera? Because I love hearing how being a director affected what you do in front of the camera.
Well, I recognized how much I started to enjoy it while I was acting on Fresh Prince. I would sit with our directors and I would watch, and I started to no longer pay attention to who was performing on screen or on set. And I started paying attention to what the director was doing. It's one of those, like, the most interesting man in the world, right? And I was like, okay, the most interesting person on this set is the director and what they have to do. So I started to fall into that then. And then there was a contract negotiation. I said, you know what? I was looking at, and I've always been kind of this person that looks long-term. I don't think about today. I think about how today affects tomorrow and beyond. And I knew that this character, Carlton, was going to be a hard character to break. You know, I went to the Cannes Film Festival with Will, and everybody was like, Carlton, Carlton, Carlton. And I realized that I was going to have to break that to go into something else. Well, then what was I going to do while I was breaking it? I still needed to be motivated and inspired. And I felt like the director was the thing that was started to inspire me the most. So I then decided to put it into my contract to direct an episode of Fresh Prince. And then once I directed it, I knew that this was something for me.
Is there a space out there for you to get back into acting the way that you are?
I would say, you know, I could. Do I really want to, you know, push to break down that wall today after I spent so much time building this new platform for myself? Well, maybe after I'm done with this platform, I go back and look at that platform. But I've spent so much of my life trying to show people who the real Alfonso Ribeiro is, that now that I get to show them that, I'm like, well, I ain't trying to mess that up. You know, I spent too long doing that. When I won Dancing with the Stars, I was given an opportunity to sit down with one of the executives at ABC, and they asked me, what do I want to do? And they were surprised when I didn't say I wanted to, you know, do another sitcom or act. I was like, no, I want to be me. Right? What Dancing with the Stars gave me was a platform to show the, you know, America who the real Alfonso Ribeiro was. I don't have to break everybody's knowledge of Alfonso Ribeiro because I'm gonna be that till I die. So that one's gonna be easy for me to stick with the rest of my time.
One of the delights, if I can say that, of the last 12 months truly was the Fresh Prince reunion. That was a really nice moment. How did it feel to see all of the love that you guys got from that reunion?
It was very special. I mean, obviously, the entire cast is near and dear in my career and on a personal level. They're family. They'll always be family. And to sit back on that set, make-believe set, it didn't look exact, but it was close. But to sit on that set and share the moments and some of those memories with everyone was a delight for me. But I felt like the producers did a fantastic job of delivering the essence of who we were as a cast and as a show. So very proud of that. I think it was really fantastic.
That was fantastic. This interview was fantastic. And honestly, talking to you was fantastic. I feel like my inner like 5 and 6 year old is going nuts because she would have probably never imagined this moment all these years later. So thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.